Mount Everest is incredibly beautiful, reaching an astonishing 29,032 feet into the sky. People from all over the world are drawn to it, curious about an adventure that promises one of the most amazing views and a chance to conquer the highest peak on Earth. But adventure can quickly turn into a tragedy, as it did for a young Australian couple after coming down the summit of Mount Everest. Monash University lecturer Maria Stridham, 34, and her husband, Melbourne vet Robert Groppel, began their ascent at the top of the world's highest mountain. The couple had successfully reached Camp 4, 400 meters below the summit. Satellite pings posted online from their phones reveal. Over the past 8 years, experienced mountaineers have successfully climbed Denali in Alaska, Aconcagua in Argentina, Mount Ararat in eastern Turkey, and Kilimanjaro in Africa. With the cyclone on the horizon and the summit in reach, Dr. Stridham willed herself to the edge of her body's capacity. A post online from Dr. Groppel's veterinary practice reveals the group had set out under cover of darkness. They will set out at almost 10 p.m. local time and will have to contend with darkness, lack of oxygen, the infamous Hillary Step, and a race against time, the hospital stated. For Tengi Sherpa, the operational manager of 7 Summit Treks, said that Dr. Stridham had been battling illness as the final push began. At first, Robert Groppel thought his wife Maria Stridham was exhausted from climbing Everest. The Australian couple had halted at well above 8,000 meters in an area known as the Death Zone, as Stridham said she could not continue. Groppel asked for her permission to go on to the summit. What neither of them realized was that it was simply not exhaustion, but altitude sickness, and that it would cost 34-year-old Stridham her life. In a moving interview with Australian television, Groppel described the hours leading to his wife's death and the decisions they both made that, for him, were tinged with grief and regret. Above 8,000 meters, even with supplemental oxygen, the risks increase markedly. The blood thickens, which combined with dehydration and effort can trigger altitude sickness, which, at its worst, can cause a lethal buildup of fluid in the lungs and brain. Complicating the issue is that it affects individuals in different ways, and the onset of the first symptoms is sometimes mistaken for tiredness or a minor illness. Decision-making can become more difficult. Small mistakes, a dropped item of equipment, a stumble, something as simple as not drinking enough, or the question of when to turn back or carry on can have multiplying and serious consequences. Walking down the mountainside, Stridham found it difficult to speak and move. After receiving oxygen and medication, she started to feel better, but after that, the Guardian said, she collapsed and was not able to be revived. Maria Stridham, 34, was forced to turn back just 15 minutes from the top of Everest when she fell ill with altitude sickness. On her way back down the mountain, she started struggling to speak or walk before she collapsed and could not be revived. I asked, "Do you mind if I go on?" And she said, "Yes, you go on, I'll wait for you here," said Mr. Groppel, who himself suffered altitude sickness and later had to be airlifted to Kathmandu. From that position, the summit didn't look that far, 15 minutes away. He went back to Stridham and the two started down, but it didn't take long to realize that something was very wrong. Stridham started having hallucinations, had trouble walking, and was speaking erratically. These symptoms could be related to a stroke brought on by cerebral edema. Helped at times by a group of Sherpa guides, and at other times apparently struggling on his own, he shared oxygen with Stridham until that ran out, and then, suffering the effects of altitude himself, recalled that he had medication for altitude sickness. It took a while for me to register that I had medication, and so as soon as I realized, I gave her a dexamethasone injection. But the long period spent high on the mountain was taking its toll on Stridham, who by the time she faded into unconsciousness, had been without extra oxygen for 20 hours. I could see that her condition had deteriorated, Groppel said. She was going through periods of being lucid and periods of hallucinating. In the broadcast, Groppel's interviewer Steve Pennells said, "There was a point when they thought she would get better. Her condition had improved, and she was taking medication and fluids, and had made camp, and then overnight she just got worse." Stridham died in Groppel's arms on May 20th. Sherpas brought Miss Stridham's body down the mountain 3 days later, from where it was airlifted to the Nepali capital, Kathmandu. Mr. Groppel is also now in Kathmandu. Helicopter pilot Andrew Gutzell's voice noticeably drops away as he starts to recount the mission to airlift the body of dead Australian climber Maria Stridham off Everest. Those days you wish you weren't a helicopter pilot. but it's part of the job. You try to keep in the back of your mind that you're bringing people's loved ones back home. After base camp, Gutzel would continue flying on up the mountain solo, meeting a group of 18 Sherpas who had taken on the exhausting and risky task of lowering Stridham down the steep faces of Everest to several hundred meters above Camp 2, 6,400 meters. Stridham was on her way home, leaving behind the estimated 200-plus dead bodies frozen on Everest. Bringing dead climbers off the mountain has always been fraught with danger, but recent advances in helicopter technology have changed the strategy. There has also been a shift in the attitude of the Sherpas towards the calmer of the mountain they call Sagamatha, goddess of the sky. Flying helicopters into Camp 2 only began around 2009, with the arrival of the Airbus in Nepal, a chopper commonly known in Australia as the Squirrel. Before that, dead climbers would need to be brought down to base camp, including traversing through the treacherous Khumbu icefall. Miss Stridham, a lecturer at Monash University in Melbourne, was one of 3 climbers to die on Everest this month. Dutch climber Eric Ari Arnold died on Friday, May 20, after reaching the summit, and Indian climber Subhash Paul died the following week as he descended the mountain. Before setting off, Ms. Stridham said she and her vegan husband have been inspired to tackle Everest and the 6 other highest mountains on other continents after receiving questions about their diet. It seems that people have the idea of vegans being malnourished and weak, she said. By climbing the 7 summits, we want to prove that vegans can do anything and more. Altitude sickness, which is also known as acute mountain sickness, happens when people have difficulty adapting to low oxygen levels at high altitudes. Most cases are mild and result in headaches, nausea, or dizziness, but in rare cases, there can be a potentially fatal buildup of fluid in the brain and lungs. Maria's tragic passing ignited a global conversation about the risks of high-altitude mountaineering, especially for those with dietary restrictions. As a staunch vegan advocate, Maria's story raised questions about the impact of extreme physical exertion and a plant-based diet at high altitudes. Her death became a catalyst for introspection within the mountaineering community, prompting discussions about the delicate balance between ambition and safety on Everest. Groppel said, "She was my inspiration, my hero, a fierce supporter of women, the epitome of perfection. I'm just attempting to be resilient. I'm working on bringing my wife home and learning how to deal with things that make me have breakdowns. Since I'm her spouse and have a duty to protect her and bring her home, it's only natural for me to place the blame on myself. It still hurts my feelings to look at any photos of her." Sherpa climbers brought Stridham's body down the mountain to Camp 2 on Wednesday. A rescue helicopter picked it up and took it to Kathmandu. Her body has now been brought to Kathmandu from the mountain, said Pu Tenzi Sherpa of the 7 Summit Treks, which organized her expedition. What are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments section below. For more videos like this, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and click on the bell icon to always be updated with the latest news as soon as it's uploaded. Thanks for watching. See you again soon in the next one.